Sunday School teacher, I'm glad you've joined us for our time of study and preparation. We are in the book of Exodus, and we are preparing for Sunday, September 17th. Again, we are in the book of Exodus, and we will be in Exodus chapter 12 for this study. The title of this lesson is Liberation, and we're going to be looking at the story of the Passover. Now, again, there's a lot in between last week's lesson and this week's lesson. This is going to be one of those weeks, again, where if you're not careful, you're going to get bogged down. So stay focused in this particular chapter. The main point that we want to get across and accomplish in this Bible study is that God provides deliverance for those who are willing to trust Him. In this session, we'll focus on the Israelites who experienced deliverance as they demonstrated their willingness to trust and obey the Lord. Now, we're going to look at the final plague on Egypt and the Lord's instructions for observing the first Passover. And after 400 plus years of being in Egypt and spending many of those years as slaves, the Israelites will be free from their captivity. In chapter 11, the Lord makes the announcement of the 10th plague, death to the firstborn male, both human and animal, in Egypt. That's what's coming. And so chapter 12, there's basically three sections in chapter 12, 23 verses that we're going to be looking at this morning. The first is the Lord's instruction to Moses and Aaron regarding the Passover. That's the first 13 verses. And then verses 14 through 20, we see the Lord permanently establishing the Passover as an annual event, festival for the people. And then verses 21 and 23 through 23, we see the Israelites responding to the Lord by worshiping Him. So let's look at these. The first 5 verses of chapter 12, we see be prepared, them being prepared. So there it says, the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month is to be the beginning of months for you. It is the first month of your year." In other words, everything is to be built around this point. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month they must each select an animal of the flock according to their family, their father's families, one animal per family. If the household is too small for the whole animal, that person and the neighbor nearest this house are to select one based on the combined number of people. You should appropriation the animal according to what each will eat. You must have an unblemished animal, a year-old male, and you may take it from either the sheep or the goats. And the Lord gives some preparation here for the people. This is what you're to do for the Passover. God directed Moses and Aaron to establish Nisan as the first month of their new year. That's verses 1 and 2. The Passover and the Exodus from Egypt mark the significant new beginning for the Israelites. And so the calendar is supposed to start from this day forward. We see in verse 3 that God required some preparation for this Passover observance of selecting the animal and actually having that animal with them for a certain number of days prior to the Passover event. Everyone had to partake in the meal from the slain animal, but not too much. And we also know that all the meat was to be consumed, and we see that in verse 4. And then we see in verse 5 that the perfect animal, and the reason that it was a perfect animal required is that it is the reflection of a perfect God. And the fully grown animal reflected the sacrifice of the people. So this year-old, this non-blemished animal that was a year old, perfect God sacrifice of the people. So preparation is required. And then we see in verses 6 and 7 the sacrifice. You were to keep it until the 14th day. In other words, he said on the 10th day, pick the animal up. On the 14th day, you kill it. So there's 4 days that they've got the animal with them. You are to keep it until the 14th day of the month. Then the whole assembly of the community of Israel will slaughter the animals at twilight. They must take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the house where they are to eat them. So here the sacrifice takes place. The Lord told Moses and Aaron to lead the Israelites to sacrifice the Passover animal, the lamb or the goat, at twilight on the 14th day of this month. It's also important that they were to do this together. There is emphasis here on family. There is emphasis on the